So I did my research on Tsarist and communist constitutions and criminal laws. I've always been super fascinated by Russian history. I love Russian history and I'm planning on going into law school, so I wanted to find a project that would enable me to combine all my interests. So as a history major, Russian history was easy to get into, but combining the law aspect was a little bit harder. But what I decided to do was look at the constitutions in this transitory period between the Tsar and communist Russia with Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks. And so looking at the constitutions, I read through them to see how they were talking about their ideology. I wanted to see what these regimes built their power on. And so of course the Tsar built his power on the supreme autocracy. He said, I am the supreme monarch, my power is absolute. And in an era when he had just barely established a constitutional monarchy and giving the people their own rights, he all of a sudden wrote this constitution basically rejecting that. He said, here you go guys, here's a couple rights to kind of keep you satisfied, but I am still in charge. And of course that didn't work, and eventually he was overthrown by the Bolsheviks, and then you get the communist regime that turns into the Soviet Union. And so I read the Soviet Union constitution and discovered that their ideology was built upon the working class. We all know about Marx and Engels and communist Russia. And so I looked at their constitution to see that they built their authority based upon the working class. They were like, the working class is the supreme power of the country, and we're gonna build our government on that. And so I looked at these and I was like, okay, this is really interesting, but like, how do you protect that ideology? Like, how do you preserve that for your government and make sure that your people are abiding by that? And so then I looked into their criminal codes, which was really hard. The Tsarist criminal code didn't exist in English, so I got together with my Russian professor and we actually translated it. So that was kind of an exciting adventure. But as I was reading the criminal codes of these regimes, it was really interesting to see how they preserve that. So I've talked about in my poster about how each section, or each criminal code contained a section about state crimes. What was a crime against the state? For the Tsar, anything that threatened his health or his safety or the safety of his heir, who of course was gonna keep this Russian monarchy going, that was punishable by death. While the communists said anything that is a crime against the state is any act that goes against the revolution that we have just barely done. What was really interesting to me, and that I wasn't able to totally talk about in this presentation, was that the Bolsheviks or the communist regime, they didn't punish state crimes with death. Nowhere in the communist criminal code is capital punishment an acceptable punishment. They were more focused on rehabilitating people, which I think goes back to their ideology of if the working class is the foundation of government, then you have to protect that working class. You can't just keep killing them off, right? You have to preserve them. And so if you really rehabilitate them, then you're able to preserve your working class and you're able to work towards this ideal society, because the communists believed that the ideal society was a society where there was no law. No law would exist and all the people would just be happy and live together, in peace and harmony. And regardless of how that actually happened in practice, is a totally different story, but in terms of how they wrote it, this is what they believed in, and this was what was important to them. So just in conclusion, what I learned was that each body of government, whether it was the Tsar or whether it was Soviet Russia, they had different ideologies, but they were both concerned about the exact same things. They both wanted to protect their power and make sure it would continue forever, long after they were gone.